Hey everyone, Tom Staley here. A lot of us are working past the age 65 these days, and we're faced with the question, how does Medicare work with employer insurance? Whether it's my employer or my spouse's. You might be thinking, can I keep my employer insurance? Do I have to go on to Medicare? Are there late enrollment penalties associated with it? I'm going to clear all these questions up for you today. Stay tuned. If you're turning 65 and you have health insurance through either your employer or your spouse's employer, you need to understand how your plan works with Medicare. More specifically, you need to understand which is the primary payer and which is the secondary payer. Once you understand that, you can then go on to look at what are your options going forward. I want to make a point that today's lesson should be really used as more of a guidance or a rule of thumb. When you're sitting down and you're looking at your situation, you should really bring in an agent like myself, someone who has expertise and knowledge, because it is complex and you want to make sure that you don't make any mistakes. Also, you should be talking with your HR department. That way everybody's on the same page. As I mentioned before, your options are going to be totally dependent on which insurance is considered primary and which is considered secondary. The primary insurer will pay first up to its coverage limits, and if there's any costs after that point, the secondary insurance may come in and cover those costs. So when you're trying to distinguish which coverage is going to be primary and which is going to be secondary, you need to ask the question, does the employer have 20 or more employees? If it's a smaller company and the answer is no, then Medicare is going to be primary while the employer insurance will be secondary. And if the employer does have 20 or more employees, that means that the employer plan will be the primary insurer and Medicare will be secondary. So let's focus on what are your options in either scenario. In the case where the employer has fewer than 20 employees, you must go on to enroll in Part A and B of Medicare when you first turn 65. One should also then go on to enroll in a Part D prescription drug plan. And I say should because it's not required. Although if you don't enroll in a Part D drug plan, you will be charged a late enrollment penalty later on when you do enroll. So I highly suggest you try to avoid that and enroll in a drug plan when you first turn 65. My final point is that you should compare secondary employer insurance with a Medicare supplement, because the Medicare supplement plans are secondary to Part A and B as well. So you kind of get a chance to decide which one you want. Now that being said, you would not want to drop your employer coverage if you had a spouse who was dependent on that employer coverage. So in that case, you would definitely want to keep the employer coverage as secondary. Now, if you don't have a spouse that's dependent on your employer insurance, I highly suggest that you look into a Medicare supplement as your secondary coverage. I think a lot of people would be surprised to find out how affordable Medicare supplements are, especially when considering the value they provide. So let's look at the other situation where the employer might have 20 or more employees. Again, the primary insurer is going to be the employer, and the secondary insurer is going to be Medicare. And since Medicare is secondary, you do not necessarily have to enroll when you first turn 65. Now that being said, most will go on to enroll in Part A only, and that is because Part A is premium free, meaning there is no cost to have Part A coverage, so might as well have it as secondary coverage if there's no cost. Now, one caveat to this is that if you are contributing to an HSA, you probably do not want to enroll in Part A. And that's because as soon as you do enroll, you lose your eligibility to make future contributions into that HSA. Now, you can use the funds that are in the HSA, you just can't continue to make contributions. So looking at the drug portion of the employer plan, you'll want to confirm that it is creditable coverage. If it is creditable, that means that your employer drug coverage is as good as Medicare Part D's base plan, and that means you can continue on with the employer coverage with no issues. If it is, however, not creditable coverage, that can be an issue down the road when you do go to enroll in a Part D prescription drug plan, because Medicare is going to look at all that time you went without a creditable drug plan, and they're going to charge you a late enrollment penalty for that time period. This is really where you'll want to talk to your HR department, because I promise you do not want to incur that late enrollment penalty and you do not want to make any mistakes here. Assuming you continue on with the employer insurance, when you or your spouse decides to retire, you'll get what's called a special enrollment period. And that is a time when you can enroll in Part A and B enroll in a standalone prescription drug plan, and add on a Medicare supplement, all without penalties. So really, in this scenario, you have a chance to kind of delay Medicare down the road. Now, that being said, my final point is that you should compare the employer insurance with full Medicare. And what I mean by full Medicare is just dropping the insurance altogether and going on to enroll in A and B, picking up a drug plan, and adding on a Medicare supplement. The reason I bring this up is because I have compared a lot of employer plans with Medicare, and I'd say in about 95% of the cases, Medicare is more affordable and more comprehensive than most employer plans out there. I do, however, want to loop back around and mention that if your spouse is dependent on your employer insurance, then dropping the employer insurance for Medicare probably isn't a good idea. That's all I have for you today. I hope you found this video helpful. And if you have any questions at all, please reach out to me. I'm here as a free resource to you. So if you have any questions, please shoot me an email or give me a call. Thanks and have a great week.